Okay, here we go. It's Basic Folk, where we have honest conversations with folk musicians. I'm Cindy Howes. Hello. Today on the podcast, we're going to be talking to Matt Smith, who is the living legend, the man himself, the managing director of the historic folk venue Club Passim. You may have heard us talk about him on Basic Folk in the past. We are excited to have him here today. But first, let's thank our sponsors for Basic Folk. Basic Folk receives support from McDean, songwriters who love each other. McDean would be delighted to send you a free CD of their first EP, The Sampler Plate. Email lin@mcdean.co, lin@mcdean.co to get one. Like I mentioned, Matt Smith is a living legend with his unbelievable run at Club Passim, the historic folk venue nestled in Harvard Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And he is currently the managing director at Club Passim. He is the most passionate music lover that I know. As Basic Folk's producer Laura McCarthy said to him while we were recording this episode, she says, it's easier to name the episodes that don't mention Matt's name and unwavering support. It's pretty incredible. She's correct. By the way, we recorded this interview on 3 Mile Island, like we did Critter Eldridge's interview at Miles of Music Camp, and we recorded it on Sunday. So what does that mean? Well, that means lots of speedboats and lots of waves, and lots of water noises and stuff like that. Anyways, Matt has used his platform at Club Passim to help establish so many artists like Laurie McKenna, Anais Mitchell, Lake Street Dive, and just a bunch more. I met Matt while working as a student at WERS, where Matt was already bringing fantastic shows into this just lovely listening room filled with people who are clamoring for honest music in an intimate space like Club Passim. So let's get into this conversation. This is a rare opportunity to have a really long conversation with Matt talking about his early love for music, his first music job at Strawberry Records. He tells the fateful tale of how he finally came across Club Passim, how he started as a volunteer and worked his way up to booking all of the shows at the venue. And Matt also shares the origin story of Club Passim's biannual festival that he founded in 1998, the Campfire, which has turned into the biggest artist development tool for the club, which is something that Matt is extremely good at for other musicians. His role in artist development in the folk world is actually pretty enormous, and it's hard to imagine what the genre would be like without him. I'm just so pleased to have him, and I think we should just get right into the conversation with Matt Smith on Basic Folk. So, Matt Smith, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure to speak with you anytime, regardless of it being recorded.
Similar feelings. So, we are currently on 3 Mile Island in New Hampshire, which is on Lake Winnipesaukee, and there's a giant bug on your shirt. There you go. There, you got it.
There's a boat coming.
There is a boat on the
coming.
water. We're overlooking the water. So we thought this would be a great time to do this interview at Miles of Music Camp, because we're both here, and also we live 2 minutes away from each other. So,
so we need to come 90 miles away to talk.
Let's start talking about Marshfield. Is that your hometown?
That's my hometown.
What was your experience like in Marshfield growing up?
Pretty middle of the road, middle class existence. I do enjoy visiting. It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. I still go back yearly to the Marshfield Fair.
Oh yeah.
Because I am that kind of person. I don't know what that means. I know during high school and probably college, I had gotten to the point where it's God, I don't want to go to the Marshfield Fair. That's garbage. Why would I ever do that? It's stupid. And now it's that total nostalgia thing, and I love going back to the Marshfield Fair.
Yeah.
Going to the Demolition Derby and,
That's really picked up
eating
these
terrible food.
Like fried dough and stuff.
Fried everything they have now. They've really embraced that culture of let's fry all the things and sell them.
So your family, was anyone musical in your family?
My dad was actually a jazz drummer, and my mom played some piano, and she said she played cello and was very bad at it. But
Did you ever witness that?
no, I never witnessed any of my parents' musical ability. I think I came along a little later in life for most parents at the time, and so I never witnessed their music. My dad, I've seen pictures of him playing drums, and apparently he was very, very good and would get hired out by military bands for parades that were coming through town. Would get hired out as a non-military person because he was
He was
a
that
much
good?
better drummer than anyone that they had.
What about your relationship to listening to music at first?
Since I was a little kid, I've been listening to music. My dad was really into Dixieland jazz, and so there were a lot of Benny Goodman records and things like that, but also a lot of Sinatra, which I also, when I was a kid, hated, because why would you want that as a kid growing up in the 70s?
Seems like, yeah, like you feel like very nauseous listening to Frank Sinatra.
Not nauseous, but it didn't make me feel comfortable. It was just like, nah, this is just gloppy and terrible. Fact is, I love listening to Frank Sinatra now. And a lot of things, just like when you're a little kid, you don't like onions, and then eventually you become an
Yeah.
adult and you say, you know what, onions are fantastic.
That's right.
So I think of Frank Sinatra as kind of my musical onion in a way.
When did music first take on a bigger importance in your life?
Probably early teens, maybe 13 or 14 is when I started playing guitar. My brother had been taking lessons, and I said, I want to do that. And so I got an acoustic guitar. And then a little later on, I bought an electric guitar and amp from an old friend of mine, from his mom, who was selling them. It was like an old Vox amp and a Guild guitar.
Cool.
I still have the Guild guitar. It's a beautiful guitar. And started to take some lessons. Back in the early 80s, I started buying my own music. But like I think I probably had a job when I was 15, and all that money was going right into buying music. And I mean that continues to this day. I'm an avid music collector. There's kind of music in every aspect of my life.
Oh, yeah. What was your first music job?
Working at a record store, at a Strawberries.
Oh, yeah. In the mall?
Yes, actually, come to think of it, it was when I was in college. It was at the what was the name of the mall? The Eastbrook Mall
Right.
in Storrs, Connecticut.
We had a record town. We didn't have a Strawberries,
Yep.
but always loved stopping by the Strawberries.
Yep. And I during the holiday breaks would get transferred either to the Pembroke or Hanover stores.
Wow.
Yeah. So
It must have been exciting.
it's been important times.
When did your interest in folk music start?
In the mid 80s, late 80s, I would, in making mixtapes for myself, essentially, I would put together what I thought of as folk music mixes, which were, would probably be, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Jackson Browne, Bob Dylan, things like that. And then a friend of mine, when I was in college, made me a mixtape of modern folk music, which I did not know was a thing. And so it had Bill Morrissey, Patty Larkin, Sean Colvin, probably The Story, or maybe The Story record wasn't out yet.
That was like 89, I think.
Yeah, so maybe it was. So David Wilcox, Cliff Eberhardt, John Gorka, kind of all the people, Cheryl Wheeler, like all the people of that time that were making modern folk music, but that were certainly all artists that were only played on the left end of the dial, which was not a place that I had visited yet on the radio, and so it really blew my mind, and I was like dug in trying to find this stuff. The internet wasn't around. You couldn't just go online and figure out who these people were or where
Right.
they were playing. And I started to kind of comb the record stores. And since I was actually a young teen, my mom would drive a friend of mine up to the Braintree Red Line tea stop, and we'd take the tea into Harvard Square, and I would go to all the record stores.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah.
know, like that was something that I was doing from the early '80s, and start to just experiment on my own. See something like, okay, well, this person sings backing on this record, and so I'm gonna pick up their record too because they're part of something.
Totally.
And that was always something that I was really
Like you're going like a treasure hunt.
yeah. I mean, that's
Yeah.
always been something that I've been really into is not just listening to the record itself, but learning about who produced it and who plays this and who plays that and where is that going to take me. Music to me is, or as far as my experience with consuming music, is to dig deeper than what I've got in front of me and find out everything about that and what that person's circle is. Because people have been doing this for decades and centuries where, you don't listen to a Martin Sexton and then sit there and let that be the end of it. You go back to Ray Charles and beyond and find what the influences were with that person, and you read whatever interviews you find from that person and really get a sense of where their music comes from. And I've always loved that, because it never ends. It just
Right.
never ends. You're always finding new music.
Sounds like you have such a strong sense of curiosity.
I do. I mean, that is what has kept me engaged for so long in working in music now. I mean, I've been working in music now for almost 25 years, and I am no less excited about it than I was when I started. I mean, like I still have those moments of, how did I get here? How did that happen? But that excitement about music, finding a new artist years ago for me was for me, but now I find that, and I, sing their praises at the top of every mountain that I can find,
Yeah.
because I have a platform where I can introduce other people to that artist.
I love that. Can you tell the story of how you first came to Club Passim, how you discovered it, how you found it to be a home for you?
Yeah, it's actually very. I have very specific, clear memories of it, where I had heard of it. I had probably started listening to after finding out about this modern folk music world. I started listening to WERS and WUMB, and finding out about these things and hearing the name Passim all the time, and I would come into town and I would pick up copies of the Folk Almanac, which was a newspaper that Scott Alric and other folks were putting together. That would have
Scott Alric wrote for the Globe.
Yep.
Boston Globe.
There was the folk writer for the Globe for many years, and
So
freelanced
cool
also.
that Boston Globe had a folk writer.
I know. I mean, that was a time,
Yeah.
where that was really a thing, and I would hear about Passim and see concert listings and hear them on the radio, and I I could not find the place for the life of me. I would walk around Harvard Square and be like, "Where's this Palmer Street? I don't know where this is at all." And so I remember one day, after getting this mixtape from this friend of mine, I went over to. It's going to be entirely too specific. I went over to Mystery Train Records on Mass Ave, and I found a copy of a Pierce Pettis CD called Chase the Buffalo, which was his new record. And so I picked that up and a few other things, and I'm walking around Harvard Square, and all of a sudden, there it was. There was Passim. I just walked down that alleyway, and I'm like, oh my God, there it is. It's right there. And
The prophecy is true.
I looked on their schedule, and Pierce Pettis was playing there the next
Are
Wednesday.
you kidding?
And October 20th, 1993.
Wow.
And I put that in my head. I'm like, I'm going to go to that. I'm going to go to that show because I got this record and I'm excited about it. And then I couldn't wait. And I went on the Sunday before that where John Svetke and Barbara Kessler were playing. And I had heard of both of them also. And so I came into town and went to the Barb Kessler and John Svecki show, and that was my first show at Passim. And it was Sunday night. It was the end of a weekend run. People used to do, you'd play Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday afternoon for a live radio broadcast, and then Sunday night. And I went to the Sunday night show, and there weren't that many people there. And I just remember being entranced. I had immediately found home because I had been going to concerts since I was a mid-teen. I remember the first year that it was called Great Woods at the time, and I have no idea what it's called anymore. It's the big outdoor amphitheater in Mansfield. I went to the first rock show they had there the year they opened. I saw Julian Lennon play there and then went to see every huge classic rock act that was playing there. And so I was going to big concerts, going to the stadium in Foxborough to go see McCartney or The Who. And then when I turned 21 and was able to get into clubs, I was going to see much smaller bands in the early 90s, like, Toad the Wet Sprocket and Cracker and bands like that. And so the venues that I was going to were getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And then when I got to Passim, and it was like, one, I can sit down. Like, I don't have to get there, because I was the nerd that would get there, right when doors opened for the rock show. And so I'd get right up to the front of the stage, and the show doesn't start for 3 hours. Like the band comes on at 10:30 or 11. I'm like, oh God, I've been standing here for so long. Apparently, I was a real old man at 21, and
Isn't that an Ann Heaton song?
it is an Ann Heaton song. I suppose that was my reference point. And then I had a seat. I didn't have to get there 3 hours early. And I was just entranced by these people that were just right in front of you playing their songs. And I think that there was no artifice to it. There was no, in scare quotes, show of, no big light show, no costume change. Not that I was going to see shows with big costume changes, things, but it was so raw and honest and immediate and intimate. It was just this person with a guitar singing their songs right in your face, and I couldn't believe it. And these people weren't much older than me, and I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And so I went to that show, and then a few days later came back for the Pierce Pettis show, and then started to go around to a lot of the other local coffee houses, the coffee house performances. And I remember in the fall of 94, when it shut down, I remember coming up into town to come to a show, and Bob and Rayanne, the couple that were running it, were packing the place up, and I couldn't fathom what was going on, because I had found this place, and this was it. Like this was the place that I wanted to see everything. And I hurt that it was closing. It made no sense to me, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And then that spring, whenever I was in Hard Square, I'd still walk by and go like, maybe it's going to open again today. Maybe there'll be a show. And it looked like there was some work being done, and they had a little table outside with a piece of paper to write your name and your address and your phone number if you wanted to help out, because they were going to reopen Passim. And I was like, yeah, there wasn't email or things like that yet, and so it was just, and I got a call, and they were looking for folks to help out in whatever way they could, running box office or there was some actual, sort of mild construction things and stuff like that. And so I started volunteering right when it reopened again. It converted to a nonprofit organization, reincorporated as a nonprofit organization, and started volunteering right away. And I couldn't believe that I was somehow now involved in this place. That over the course of a year plus before that, had completely It had completely changed my musical life and my worldview in a lot of ways.
So Passim opened, was it 1958 as Club 47?
Yep.
Is there any way to talk about the different incarnation of the club over the years?
Sure. Well, when it originally opened, it was a jazz club, and then, from the stories I've heard, basically, like, it was a jazz club for a little while, and then Joan Baez was looking for gigs as a college freshman or whatever, and the scene was changing, and everyone was like, "Oh my goodness, who is this person? We need to put her on all the time." And the programming changed to folk music.
Because of Joan Baez?
Kind of.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, like, and the uprising of folk music at the time. And so it ran. Some folks say it was a nonprofit back then. It wasn't so much a nonprofit. It was what was called a private club because of the Massachusetts blue laws that are very strange laws that are still on the books in a lot of places till this day. That state you can't have X number of people and X number of stringed instruments and drinks at the same place. It's like it's the sort of thing where it's also illegal to eat peanuts in church. Like that was actually a law on the books at some point.
God.
Illegal.
You know that song that's it's like Mama don't want no
Oh yeah.
guitar playing around
Yeah.
here? Kind of sounds like the blue laws were based on that
kind
song.
of, yeah. And so it became a private club where it was like $1 to get a Club 47 membership, and I think they were. I don't think you had to re-up your dues. I think it was a lifetime membership.
I wonder if anybody's still in that.
Yeah, I mean, there's people that have the cards, But so the folks that had run it at the very, very beginning moved on, and then there were three folks: Betsy Siggins, Jim Rooney, and Byron Leonardos, who then took over running the place for the rest of the duration of the Club 47. It was started at 47 Mount Auburn Street. It moved to 47 Palmer Street in October of '63. After being, basically told by the landlord, we don't like your kind around here. You got to get out of here. It's too noisy and you're all undesirables. And so they moved across Harvard Square to an empty space that had no floor. They put the bricks in themselves and also did not have an address. And so the post office was petitioned to let it be 47 Palmer Street because they were already called the Club 47. So it stayed there until it closed down in '68, where the folk scene had kind of changed. A lot of folks had moved out west, out to Berkeley, California. A lot of the folk world had gone electric, as it happened, and still happens.
And was Passim like very strictly folk, like no electric guitars?
Do you mean Club 47?
Yes, Club 47.
Club 47, no, because the Chambers Brothers played there, like Muddy Waters, Buddy Guy, with their bands. They weren't strictly folk, or strictly folk in whatever folk means to anyone at any given time. It's
no drums, no piano.
Yeah, the radio rule. No, it wasn't like that. But when it reopened, and I can't recall the names of the people that first reopened Passim, but it wasn't Bob and Rayanne. But then Bob and Rayanne took over the space very soon after it reopened, and they weren't doing music at all. It was gifts and cards and books and kind of random
store?
random curiosities. And people kept coming by saying, "Where's the music? What's going on? Where's the music?" And I think eventually they just got irritated by the question and started putting music on. But then it became the home of what has often been called sort of the urban folk singer or the urban singer-songwriter for the next 25 years, through some pretty lean times in folk music. The 80s, you don't necessarily think of a lot of folk music.
What about like fast folk?
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true, but that was in New York.
Right, okay.
But a lot of those folks from Fast Folk were coming up to Boston and playing.
Right.
There were a handful of other clubs that were going on while Passim was going on in the 70s and 80s. There was the Idler. That's the one that jumps to mind. That a lot of folks were playing at both Passim and the Idler.
Is there anything happening in Northampton?
Right now?
No, like at that in the 70s and 80s.
I'm sure there's something happening.
Should we go check it out?
Let's go. Let's get a boat. Can you get a boat to Northampton?
Probably. Like a duck boat.
Yeah, exactly. We'll go over the mountains here. I don't know. I really don't know if anything was going on because I don't think the Iron Horse started till the 80s. Later in the 80s.
Right.
But I'm not certain of the history of that.
I'm not questioning you on the history of folk music.
Or of Northampton.
But maybe
Northampton
of
was incorporated as a town.
So I remember being in college and loving music and loving radio, but kind of like not understanding about how powerful it was to actually like make a difference in a community, both for music fans and for musicians, until I started meeting those community musicians and then actually like really caring about them and caring about connecting them with music fans. And I imagine you have your own experience with that.
Sure. After volunteering for a few months at the club, I was asked to come on and learn more because I was there more often than even some of the staff were. Because I was a little music geek and loved being there and had a job that I was completely unfulfilled in. Like a job that you get out of college, a little ways out of college, just because you're supposed to get a job and you need to pay for things. Mm-hmm. And I had a job that I really didn't connect with or enjoy at all. So I started volunteering at the club more and more. And when I started working, I started to learn about these, this incredible scene of young artists that were just getting their start. Mm-hmm. And I started to, in working in a venue, you're trying to figure out how to get people to come to shows. And so I started to think of how to get creative in crossing over audiences with this artist and that artist and who to pair as an opening act with one act to the next, or how do you structure a bill so that people don't leave when they just see the person that they want to see and don't hang around for anything else. So I started to get into programming a little bit, which I never really thought that was something that I was going to do. But it was purely because these artists were friends of mine and I wanted to help them out because I thought they were incredibly talented and people would get excited by them when they saw them. And so the first show I put together was I started a series called Songwriters in the Square, where it would be an in the round show or like something very collaborative or with the opportunity to be very collaborative. And sort of bringing that the whole is going to be greater than the sum of its parts, where each artist is going to inspire each other and kind of take the whole thing to another level as opposed to just seeing a set of this person, a set of that person, a set of that person, you're out. Mm-hmm. So these artists kind of inspired me to take a creative role in my job. I really started to get excited about not just the music itself, but how to get that music in front of people. Like how to put something together that was going to excite an audience.
So it sounds like the club really took a chance on you when it came to programming and curating.
Absolutely.
And so how long did it take before you were able to establish yourself as someone who has like really good ear for talent? Did you ever have to like fight for certain artists or concepts?
Not. I wouldn't say fight. I would certainly let my voice be heard. In advocating for artists. Mm-hmm. And
were you told no? Like, what would happen if they said no? Were you just like, all right?
Yeah, I don't know that I was told no. I mean, in a space where you're programming 7 nights a week, there's always space. there's always, that Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday that your big headline act doesn't want to play, and so you're able to get creative. You're able to say, I'm going to take this Monday night and try to do something interesting enough to get people to come out on a Monday night to see it. Or I'm going to take this bad holiday weekend and do something with that. See how I did that?
Yes.
So I led right into that?
Right.
Saw it in your eyes. So this Songwriters in the Square series that I was running, we'd take 3 or 4 artists and put them in the round. And rounds can be transcendent, but they can be awful.
Can you explain really quickly what a round is?
A round is where you have 3 or 4 people on stage together and they swap songs. Like, you kind of go down a row. One person plays, then the next person plays, the next person plays, the next person plays.
Who made that up? Joan Baez?
Probably one before her. I think the cave people probably made that up. Grunting in the round. And I think that the key to an in the round that works is there are common threads with people, and also the willingness to be in the moment. If a person sort of has a set list in mind when they're in the round, it kind of breaks it into segments as opposed to being a continual flow. Mm-hmm. So someone that is going to just sit there rigidly and awkwardly while the other 3 people play until it gets back to them, and then tells their story as if nothing else happened around them, that's not fun. That's not fun for anybody.
So the way you would program
is try to
Songwriters in the Square to have collaborative people in
it. Sometimes it was very directed and they would work out stuff ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it was just, I think these people would go well together. It was deliberate. It wasn't just, well, here's 3 people that can show up that day. It was deliberate.
Right.
The series was going fairly well. I mean, they're when I think back to like some of the folks that played those shows, like Mary Gaucher played them and Slade Cleaves played them, and and it was like all these people that are like, wow, they're all awesome and still going and are, still writing their best songs and are successful in their careers, and everyone's got to start somewhere, and so. In the summer of '98, a friend of mine who was an artist manager and I started talking about this Songwriters in the Square concept, and we were coming up on Labor Day weekend, which is a terrible booking weekend because it's a holiday weekend. People go away, and so you're at that conundrum of the big headline act that wants, that has a guarantee on them, you might be hard pressed to cover that guarantee because people won't come out because they're away for the weekend, or those artists just might not want to play because it's a holiday weekend. Mm-hmm. And so we started to kind of come up with a concept of taking this Songwriters in the Square series and exploding it over a weekend, because at the time the Club Passim open mic scene was huge. I mean, we would have, it had gotten to the point now where there were so many people that signed up. It was a one song open mic, and we would have anywhere from 30 to 60, or maybe even more than 60 people sign up to perform. We would have sold out open mic nights, because then you'd get that many in audience as well. And there were points where we'd have to turn people away, and they'd have to come back, later when someone had left. And so the local scene was really huge right then, with a lot of incredible talent. Chris Delmhorst and Jess Klein and Jay Beyer and Sean Staples and Mark Corelli and Rose Polanzani, and we're all coming up at this time. So we thought about how to take this concept and just blow it out over the weekend, but also it was the same weekend that the brand new Boston Folk Festival was going to happen. And so we met with the folks who were starting that up and talked about how we could collaborate, where if people bought a pass for the Boston Folk Festival, we'd let them into our weekend for free. And apart from that, it was going to be $5. You pay $5. It was from 3 or 4 o'clock till to about 2 or 3 in the morning. And then Saturday and Sunday it was from noon till 2 or 3 in the morning. And we didn't program Monday, the
Were
holiday.
you there the whole time?
Yeah. Yep, and have been for almost all of them since. There have been a few single days that I've missed because of weddings and things like that, but never a whole day. You know, like I'll go to the wedding and then drive back and be there for as much of it as I can. And the idea was we just take this scene. We had so many great people and not enough spots on a regular calendar to give them gigs, and not that they would have enough draw to have a gig of their own. But how could we kind of celebrate all of this and give them stage time in a planned way as opposed to an open mic? There were a lot of folks that were brand new to the scene. I remember Erin McEwen played the first one, and she was still in college when that happened. And Marcarelli played.
What year was the first campfire?
It was Labor Day of 1998. And we were hoping that over the course of the weekend that we would get 200 people to come. Like that would be a success, a huge success. Even though it was, 15-hour days of music, it just felt like if we got people to hang out for this completely nutty thing, then it would be a huge success. And I remember Sunday night, we crossed over 600 tickets.
For the first weekend?
For the first time we've done it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we couldn't believe that that many people came to this ridiculous thing. and people don't get paid for it. If we paid people for it, we would go broke. When people talk about, like the free gig, the free gig is kind of garbage. It's like, well, I'm also volunteering my time. This is putting an extra week of work into a regular work week. I'm working an extra 40 hours plus over the campfire weekends on top of the 40-hour week I'd already done. So, I'm in it with the musicians. I'm there for them. Like it's all about taking them and finding the audience for them. And there have always been standouts at the Campfire Festival that then move on pretty quickly into opening slots and headlining slots, and you can get a lot of traction from it. And it's still, I'd say it's still our best artist development tool that we use to this day.
Yeah. So I have been to the Campfire a number of times and have my own crazy stories, but do you have what is the craziest campfire story?
Oh, there was actually one of my favorite campfire moments was a couple years ago. Dietrich Strauss, Dinty Child, and Zach Hickman did the closing round, and they brought in a bunch of branches and a little fake campfire and camp chairs, and we turned the lights down to nothing, and it was like essentially being at Miles of Music camp, and they were actually playing around a campfire. And so they had all these branches, so it looked like they were sitting in the forest. When one of them would use would take a cape off their guitar, they'd clamp it to a tree branch.
That's so cool.
And it brought in a cooler of beer to hand out to people. It was pretty hilarious.
Oh, that's so funny. What advice would you give someone in a different city trying to build up their own local music community?
Well, I think it is just the idea to think of it as a community, and don't think of too many ideas for your end game, what you're let your goals be flexible, and always be there for each other, because if you have an idea of what you want it to be and someone else has a different idea, it's not going to go well. It's not going to work if you're all working towards different ends or doing it with different reasons. There's a certain amount of altruism that has to be part of everyone's way of thinking about it, as this needs to be for the betterment of everyone without gain, for it to be honest, I think. I over the years I've had several people ask me to be their manager, several artists, and I dip my toe in the water once or twice, but I have found that I am much more valuable as an advocate when I'm not their manager, because someone else can look at a manager as like, well, you stand to gain from this because you are essentially on this artist's payroll.
Right.
You're their sales pitch in a way. And if I don't have any horse in the race, and I go up to a festival booker and say, you need to check out this artist, they're amazing, they're more likely to listen to me than if they hear it from the manager, who, of course, the manager has to say they're amazing. And it might be because that manager believes they're amazing, but there is a power structure and dynamic there that's attached to it. At some point, there's got to be someone in there who is doing it purely because they love the music.
That's so true. Here's a question for you.
Yes.
Are you ready for the lightning round?
Oh, I am ready for the lightning round.
Okay, we will be right back. Basic Folk is supported by Tina and her pony. If you like fresh takes on traditional music, you might like Tina and her pony. Follow them on Spotify or at Tina and her pony. And thanks to WIUP in Indiana, Pennsylvania, which airs Basic Folk 2 p.m. Eastern every Saturday. You can listen on 90.1 if you're in the Indiana, PA area, or at their website, wiupfm.org. Matt Smith, you ready for the lightning round?
I'm ready for the lightning round.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll start from the bottom up. I usually start from the top down. But
Dog.
All right. Matt Smith, what is the most beautiful place you've ever visited?
Wow. There's a lot of beautiful places. The most beautiful place that I've visited often is probably where we're sitting right now.
Yeah.
3 Mile Island on Lake Winnipesaukee.
Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Trek.
If you were a doll, what accessories would come in your box? Copyright my friend Samantha.
An interesting hat, just because I never really wear one as a human being.
What kind
but
of
I
hat?
think maybe as a doll, I could pull off a hat in a way that I
top
don't.
hat.
Could be. It might just be a beret. No, that'd be pretentious.
Ooh, yeah.
But maybe a bowler.
Okay. Records or streaming?
Records. Oh, please. Records.
Flying or invisibility?
Flying. You know, I used to have dreams of flying, but it was more like hovering. I would be horizontal and I would hover about 4 feet above the ground. You know, like I'd be, my head would actually be lower than it normally would be if I was fully standing. So I would float around about 4 feet above the ground.
That's wild.
It's really weird. I don't know what that means.
I don't either.
Someone, call in. The lines are open.
Caller, you're on the air. Morning person or night owl?
Night owl.
Beatles or Rolling Stones?
Beatles.
Favorite type of white noise?
Ocean or water, lapping water like we have right now.
Wonderful. Dream collaboration?
What am I collaborating in?
If you musician.
Oh,
Music.
musician?
Yeah. Or dream in the round.
Oh, interesting. Oh, wow. Yeah, you know, I hadn't really... Wow.
Not prepared for these questions.
This one, dream in the round. Well, Zach Hickman is going to be part of it, and did Child... Actually, you know what? My dream in the round just happened at the club about 3 weeks ago, where it was Dinty Child, Zach Hickman, Mark Early, and Diedrich Strauss. And that is a super white male round, I know. Mm-hmm. And there's no diversity in that whatsoever. And I know that's not what I want to promote, but it was just so fun. It wasn't about them being white men.
Right. I'll let you pass on that one.
So, thanks. Can we edit that out?
First concert.
I think it was Sha Na Na, actually, at the South Shore Music Circus in Cohasset, Massachusetts.
Who is your favorite teacher?
Richard Gardner, my high school senior year English teacher.
Dogs, cats, or something else?
Dogs.
Matt Smith, you did B- on the lightning round.
Oh, wow, I got to go back to school.
This has been really great. I feel like we talked for
fun.
2 hours. Thanks so much, Matt.
Thank you, Cindy.
I think that Matt is the guest on Basic Folk who listens to Basic Folk the most. Like, Matt listens to Basic Folk he probably is like the second person after my mom to listen to all of the Basic Folks. He's been a huge supporter of the podcast, and I want to thank him a lot for all that he's done. And in fact, we had a Basic Folk live at Club Passim actually on the day that this podcast is going to be released. We did a live episode, and we'll be sharing a couple of those coming up. Actually, 2 episodes will be shared that were recorded live at Club Passim. So I'm pumped to share those with you at a future date. And thank you, Matt Smith, for just being a force of goodness in the world and for being on the podcast. Laura McCarthy produces Basic Folk. Lindsay Myers is our business manager. Alex Stanton of Townspeople does our music. I'm Cindy Howes. You can find more information about Basic Folk at cindyhowes.net. Sign up for the newsletter. You can join the Facebook group Basic Folk Basics, and just, keep on listening and subscribing and sharing and just shining and doing good stuff. Okay, we'll talk to you next week. Bye.